Your business exists because you had the idea to start it. Everything begins in our minds. That's why your business results cannot outgrow your current level of thinking. Do you want to serve more clients, make more money, without working more or burning yourself out? Grow yourself first as a leader of your business, because that's who you are, a leader, even if you're the only person in your business right now. When you lead yourself first, the business results will always follow. My name is Maggie Perrotin. I'm an international business and leadership coach, an expert in business mindset, strategy, and high performance. I created the Diamond Effect podcast to help you elevate your thinking, expand your perspective, and through it, grow your business without overwhelm. So let's get started. Welcome back to Diamond Effect podcast. I'm your host, Maggie Perrotin, and today's episode is a little bit different again. And maybe because it's summer and I feel like talking about a little bit different topics than your typical business sales strategy. And I've been meaning to record this one for quite some time. So I love reading. I read a lot or as much as possible given my day-to-day with family, business, and all that. And because of that, I'm constantly being asked to recommend books to others, whether they're to my clients, to people in my network, to my family. And not even that long ago, I put together a reading list for some family members who asked for recommendations on a specific topic. So then it hit me. I actually never really share this with my audience. So today, I want to change that. Most of the books that I read on day-to-day basis are business books, self-development books in that genre. And then occasionally I read a fiction novel, usually on my time off. I used to read way more fiction, but since I became a professional and really interested in business and then into self-development and coaching, I completely switched gears how I read 95% of business self-development books. So today I want to share with you 9 books that genuinely changed my life. Not just the books I read and thought that they were interesting, but books that shifted something in me, how I think, how I lead, or how I operate day to day, how I show up as a mom, partner, business owner, or coach. And I want to tell you not just what those books are about, but also why I read them, what was happening in my life at the time, and what specifically changed because of them. Because I really think that this context is what will make my book recommendation to you actually useful. And I also thought that going forward, I will occasionally do book-themed episodes. Maybe I will recommend you some books on sales or on people leadership on more of a specific topics. But since it's the first one ever I recorded on books, we'll start here with the 9 books that changed a lot to the better for me in my life. So let's get into it. The first book is Mindfulness, an 8-week plan for finding peace in a frantic world by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. And I wanted to start with this one because it is genuinely the very first book that started my personal development journey, which means that in a lot of ways, everything else on this list exists because of this first book. And here is where I was when I found it. So I was a young mom. I had a toddler and a baby, and I was still in a demanding mid-management corporate role at the time. And I was busy. The kind of busy when you're moving so fast, you're actually not present for any of it. You're moving from dropping the kids to daycare, dialing into your first meeting on the way to work, meeting to meeting, then running out to get the kids back from daycare, trying to feed them in the evening and so on. So usually by Thursday night every week, I was mentally exhausted and drained and not patient with my kids, not really showing up the way I wanted as a mom and as a parent. And I was trying to do all of those things, but then really I wasn't there for any of them. So then one summer, I visited my sister who lives in Germany, and she had this book on her table, I think, in Polish. And I picked it up and started reading it, and something said to me that this is what I needed, that I needed to read that book and implemented it. So when I got back to Canada, I bought it in English, finished reading it, and then I started the 8-week plan, which, full transparency, at the time took me more like 3 months. But I did it and I followed it step by step. And what I also want to tell you is that before reading that book, I was the person who would tell you that I can't meditate, that my mind is constantly going 10,000 miles per minute. And I cannot just sit there and be still for 10 minutes and not think, that I don't have time, meditation is not for me. I had every excuse. But because of that book, I've decided to just find a way to do it no matter what my brain was offering me. So I committed to doing just one meditation a week. I started with one, not even every day, and it wasn't long, one a week, 10 to 15 minutes. And the change that I felt in how I operated and the reduction of stress was truly undeniable, especially the first days, of course, after I've done the meditation. The calm, the mental space, the patience. So I was converted to the benefits of meditation. So if you've ever told yourself that you can't meditate, this is the book for you. It meets you exactly where you are. It starts really slow and minimal, and it's very practical, and it works. I'm the proof of that. So who do I want to recommend it to? If right now you're the one who feels constantly overwhelmed, busy, and mentally drained, even if you think that you're not the type who can meditate, or you're a working parent, this one is for you. Okay. Book number 2 is The 5 Dysfunction of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I read this book once while I was still in the corporate world. It was actually recommended and gifted to every manager in the company but our CEO. So I read it because I was appreciative of the gift, and I ended up being really grateful for that gift. What I love about this book is how approachable and easy to read it is. It is written as a business fable, so a little story, which makes the principles that are being taught in that book very easy to absorb and remember, and kind of like they're put in practice through that story. And underneath that story, the author talks about some of the most important insights that I've ever encountered about what makes teams succeed or fail. And the thing is that at the time, I was hired to fix a dysfunctional team. And it was genuinely a difficult team with trust issues because they had 7 managers over the very short period of time. They were being blamed for everything under the sun. There were communication problems, low performance, lack of standards and processes. And even though that particular book is written about an executive team, I decided to apply the principles to my team that was entry-level frontline employees. And guess what? It worked better than I ever expected. So my team turned around. They became one of the highest performing teams in the company at their level. And so I truly become a believer, not just in the book, but the idea that you can turn around a team, that it's not always the individual employees or that employees are bad that creates dysfunction, but it's the leadership and the trust and everything that books teaches that contributes to high functioning teams or dysfunction of a team. Because for me, I turned around a team without really changing employees. I had to add some employees because they were understaffed, but the core of the team stayed exactly the same. And then also what it taught me is that dysfunction is not permanent, right? With the right principles, consistent leadership, you can transform any team completely. So I still recommend this book to every single person who wants to learn about people leadership, who manages people or wants to in the future. And if you only read one book on leadership and team building, make it this one. It will be worth your while, I promise. Book number 3 is The Confidence Code by Katie Kay and Claire Shipman. I read this one also during my corporate years, and it landed differently from anything I've read before because it gave me permission. It was permission to acknowledge that I sometimes did hold back, that I didn't always say what I thought in the meeting, that I struggled with imposter syndrome occasionally, even when my results clearly showed that I belonged in the room. What that book showed me is that I wasn't alone as a woman, especially in male-dominated industry, in higher positions, that there was less and less women in those circles. And it showed me that even the most accomplished and successful women in the world, politicians, executives, journalists, athletes, sometimes struggle with confidence, with speaking up, with owning their expertise. And most importantly, it also showed me that confidence is not something that you either have or don't have. It's something you can build. It's a skill. And seeing that laid out in research and in the stories of real women who were really successful in their respective careers and through their journeys that encountered, they were exactly where I was at some point, and who also learned to step into their confidence, it was profoundly empowering for me. It made me realize that being quiet in the room wasn't necessarily who I was, but it was a habit that I developed by shrinking and not feeling confident enough to speak up. But the habits can be changed. And I changed. So this book, I recommend to any woman who has ever shrunk in a meeting or in her own business, second-guessed herself, held back from doing what she really wants to do or saying what she really thought. And honestly, any leader who manages women or who works with women and wants to understand what their team members might be experiencing that they're not showing or talking about too often. Book number 4 is a classic. This is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I read this book multiple times over and over, and I get back to it regularly. But the first time I read it was when I was starting to build intentional personal habits after the mindfulness book had opened that world for me. And I was beginning to plan my weeks, create routines, think more deliberately about how I was spending my time and energy and being present and focused. And this book took all of that to a completely different level. And what I love about it is that it's not just your typical productivity book. It's also a philosophy book. It's a life book. The habits it teaches aren't just about being more efficient. They're about how to think, how to see people, how to live with intention. But the thing that stayed with me the most, the thing that genuinely shifted something deeply in me, was how it busted a myth that I didn't even realize I was carrying. And I think I'm not the only one in that limiting belief. I think a lot of people have a hidden conflict around success, that idea that to be really successful in business, successful financially, to be ambitious and driven, you have to become someone you don't want to be. Someone cold or cutthroat or self-serving. And this book dismantled that for me completely. It showed me that you can be highly effective, deeply successful, and still genuinely good, compassionate, value-driven, that those things aren't in conflict, they're actually complementary. And that realization made me calmer, made me more confident about pursuing big goals without feeling like I had to compromise who I was to get there, made me confident to be ambitious and not feel shame or guilty about it. So I recommend this book to honestly anybody, to everyone, but especially ambitious people who feel maybe that tension between their drive for success and their values as a human being. Book number 5 is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This is one of the most famous entrepreneurial/business books ever written. And I picked up this one when I became entrepreneur. It was being recommended constantly in business circles, networking groups that I attended. And it is considered one of the foundational classics of entrepreneurship. And I wanted to understand why people love it so much and why it is being recommended. The principles inside it are genuinely powerful. This was my first real encounter with the idea that your thoughts create your results, that how you think impacts how you feel, and how you feel impacts what you do. And what you do, of course, creates the results in your life, right? Your outcomes. So that belief and mindset aren't soft or the secondary things or woo, they're actually foundation of everything. So now I do want to be honest about something that I've noticed in that book because I think it is important, especially if you're a woman reading the book. The book was written in the 1930s by a man at a time where women had very different rights and very little representation in business, right? There's almost no women's perspective in it. The examples and the stories, the language, it's very much of this era. So if you read it, take it with that context in mind, that it was written during those times. Filter out what doesn't apply and focus on the principles being taught in the book. Because underneath the dated framing, there are ideas about confidence, self-belief, persistence, and really the power of focused thought that are as relevant today as they were 100 years ago. So I recommend this book to any entrepreneur, business owners, especially if you're in early stages of building your confidence in yourself and your vision and you haven't read the book yet. And also anyone who hasn't yet explored the connection between mindset and results. Book 6 is actually, I'm cheating here a little bit because it's 2 books from the same author. It's Dare to Lead and Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I've read multiple of her books, but these 2 in particular have shaped how I think about leadership, vulnerability, and knowing myself. Here is what Brené Brown taught me that nobody else had quite articulated it this well before. Being willing to be vulnerable, to feel fully, to show up authentically, even when it's uncomfortable, even when there is risk of failure or feeling shame because of what people say or what people might think or how they might judge you, is actually not weakness. It's the foundation of everything that matters. Better relationships, being a better leader, a more aligned life and business, actually more success. Dare to Lead specifically gave me a framework for leading with values, for knowing what I actually stand for and letting that guide every decision I make as a business owner and as a coach. And I use this framework as a start to help my clients define their own values and then bring some of that into their business. So to align their business with who they are, especially in the beginning when they don't have a team, and create those foundational filters for their decisions as business owners and CEOs. And then Daring Greatly showed me that people who are the most alive, most successful, most connected are the ones who are willing to step into the arena even when they know they might fail. people who don't let the fear of judgment or failure keep them on the sidelines of their own lives, who have courage to take risks, right? To be intentional about their lives, even if they don't have certainty that whatever they're going after, whatever they're doing is going to work 100% of the time, because none of us has that certainty. Life is 50-50. 50% of the time, things that we do work really well, sometimes better than expected, and 50% of the time, they don't. And this is so important for business owners, because building something, putting your ideas, your offers, your voice out in the world is scary and therefore requires enormous vulnerability. And most people hold back because of that. I coach a lot of my clients, especially the ones who are in the beginning stages of the business, around that fear. And I coach them to be willing to be vulnerable, right? And lean into that fear and still do the things that they want to do. So these books give you sort of permission to stop holding back. So I recommend it to anyone who wants to be a better leader of a team, of a business, or of their own life. Anyone who maybe struggles with perfectionism, fear of judgment, or showing up fully as themselves, it's wonderful books. Book 7 is The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. I've read a lot of books on sales over the years, but this one was one of my earliest books, and it gave me something foundational that then I carried into everything that came after. So what I love about it is exactly what the title says, right? It's not just about techniques or scripts or closing tactics. It's about the psychology behind why people buy, how people think as a consumer, as a person who purchases something. What actually moves someone from interest to decision. And when I started understanding sales through that lens, through the lens of a human psychology, it made a big difference. And it also helped me overcome all the limiting beliefs I had about sales, right? I would stop thinking of sales as something you do to someone and more started understanding it as something you do with someone, as a conversation, as a service, an act of help. And this is especially important for service-based business owners. So whether you are home-based service, you're a professional, you're a creative designer, who often feel uncomfortable selling because it feels at odds with their desire to help. And understanding the psychology behind it removes that discomfort. It is definitely not the most sophisticated or technical sales book out there, but if you've never read a book on sales, this is where I recommend you start. So if you're a service-based business owner and you're new to sales, or you're uncomfortable selling, or anyone who just wants to understand why people buy before learning how to sell, I highly recommend this book. Book number 8 is The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. And this one is very different from everything on this list today. And it's not really a business book in your traditional sense. It's not a productivity book or a leadership book. It's a book about your relationship with money, and it will challenge you in ways you might not expect. Lynn Twist is a global activist who has worked with both the wealthiest people in the world and the most impoverished communities. And from that extraordinary vantage point, she has developed a philosophy about money that is unlike anything I encountered before, but I deeply resonated with it. As an entrepreneur, you will face your money beliefs, and we all have some limiting beliefs around money. Some of us have more, some of us have less. It all depends how you were raised and who parted those beliefs on you. So you will come up against the stories you were told about money growing up, the beliefs you inherited about whether people like you deserve wealth, the guilt around charging what you're worth, the fear around investing in yourself and your business. And most people never consciously examine those beliefs. They just live inside them, but those beliefs quietly shape every financial decision that you make. So this book was the beginning of my journey of examining my own money beliefs, of understanding where they came from, whether they were actually serving me or not, whether they were actually serving me or holding me back. It's unconventional. It's part memoir, part philosophy, but the stories that Lynn tells from her work across the world will stay with you. I would recommend it to any entrepreneur who has ever felt guilty about charging what they're worth, or struggled with money blocks, or felt a complicated relationship with wealth and success. It's a beautiful book. And now the ninth and the final book. This is one of the more recent ones I've read, and one that genuinely surprised me with how much it shifted my thinking. It's 10x is Easier Than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. The premise sounds counterintuitive, right? How could you growing 10 times be easier than doubling, than growing twice? But the argument the book makes is actually very deep and profound, I think. When you set a 2x goal, when you want to double, let's say, your business, all you try to do is more of what you're already doing, maybe better, maybe faster, maybe more efficiently, but you're still operating within the same framework, the same thinking, the same limitations, because that's enough to double. But when you set a 10x goal, you actually have no choice but to think completely differently, because you can't get there just by doing the same things harder. That just straight road to burnout. You have to innovate. You have to eliminate what doesn't belong. You have to first really become a different version of who you are to even conceive how it's possible. And the part that I love the most is helped me change how I relate to my goals. So often when we set goals, we can use them as a weapon against ourselves when we don't hit them on the timeline that we imagined, right? We feel like failures, we shrink from the goal. And I talked about setting goals and the relationship you can have in the goals on this podcast. If you want to know more about that, look through previous episodes, and I might link some of them in the show notes. But that book reframes that completely. Like, big goals aren't about beating yourself up when you fall short. They're just about expanding who you become in the pursuit of them. They're there to spark your innovation. They're there to push you to grow in ways that a comfortable incremental goal never would. And it's okay. You might not hit the 10x goal in the time frame that you thought, but when you will look back, you'll realize you went way further than any 2x goal would have taken you. And you can still hit it. It might take you a bit longer than you thought. Okay? So I recommend it to business owners who feel like they're playing it safe with their goals, entrepreneurs who are ready to think bigger, but you don't know how to do it without overwhelming yourself. So those are the 9 books that genuinely changed my life. And let me do a quick recap for you here. 1, Mindfulness by Mark Williams and Danny Penman, for anyone who thinks they can't meditate and needs to find calm in the chaos of their day-to-days. 2, The 5 Dysfunction of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. This is the best book on leadership and team building I've ever read, and also the easiest to read. 3, The Confidence Code by Kathy Kay and Claire Shipman, for every woman who has ever held back when she had something worth saying. 4, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, the foundation of intentional, value-driven success. 5, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, the classic on mindset and the power of belief, and read it with the context. 6, Dare to Lead and Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, on vulnerability, values, and showing up fully as a leader. 7, The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. This is the place to start if you've never read a book on sales. 8, The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist, for every entrepreneur who needs to examine their relationship with money. And 9, 10x is Easier Than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, for anyone to think bigger and stop playing small. And hey, I would love to know, have you read any of these? Is there a book that changed your life that you would want to recommend? I always love book recommendations. I always look for them so I can add them to my reading list. So come and find me on Instagram or LinkedIn and let me know. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who loves books and who could use a great reading list. And then subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next themed book episode coming soon. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening today. If this podcast resonated with you, please come back. Also, you can leave a review on whatever platform you're listening. And if you have a suggestion, question, or a topic you would like me to talk about, let's get in touch via email. Email me at maggie@stairwaytoleadership.com. See you in the next episode.